She was 8 months pregnant when she heard her husband planning her murder. Through the study door, his voice calm, casual, like he was discussing the weather instead of her death. After the birth, obviously, we are not monsters. Meredith Callahan had married into one of America's wealthiest families. She thought she had found her fairy tale ending. The handsome husband, the mansion, the baby on the way. She was wrong.
Sure?
What she
Is
discovered
everything
next would shatter
okay?
everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the man who shared her
Thank
bed.
God.
Her best friend was a spy. Her mother-in-law was a killer. And the only person who could save her was the billionaire enemy she had been warned to fear. This is not just a story about a betrayal. This is a story about survival.
I will not
about
be
a woman who
silenced.
refused to become another victim.
What happened
about the
to
moment
me
she stopped
was
running and
wrong.
started fighting back.
And I know
Stay
in
with
my
me until the
heart
end,
that you
because
see
what
the
happens
truth
next
of it
will leave
now.
you breathless. Unfortunate accident. Fortunate. The words drifted through the mahogany study door like poison seeping through cracks. Meredith Callahan pressed her palm against the cold wood, her 8-month pregnant belly making it hard to breathe. The tea tray in her other hand trembled, the china cups rattling against their saucers. She had come to bring her husband his afternoon Earl Grey. A simple wifely gesture she had performed hundreds of times during their 3 years of marriage. Douglas liked his tea at exactly 4:15 in the afternoon. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. She knew his preferences better than she knew her own. After the birth, obviously, Douglas's voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used when discussing quarterly reports or golf handicaps. "We're not monsters, Mother." Vivian Callahan's response came sharp and crisp. "The insurance policy is already adjusted. Preston handled it last week. Complications during delivery are not uncommon for first-time mothers her age." Meredith's knees buckled. She caught herself against the doorframe, pressing her body into the shadows of the hallway. The baby kicked inside her, hard, as if warning her. "And the trust fund?" Douglas asked. "Transfers automatically to any living offspring upon her death, then to us as guardians until the child reaches 25. Vivian paused. "By then, well, children have accidents too." The tea tray slipped from Meredith's fingers. She caught it just before it crashed to the marble floor. But one cup toppled. The sound of porcelain hitting stone echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Silence fell behind the door. "What was that?" Vivian's voice sharpened. "Probably rosemary?" Douglas sounded irritated. "I'll check." Meredith ran. Her swollen feet carried her down the hallway, past the portrait gallery, past the music room, into the powder room near the kitchen. She locked the door behind her, pressed her back against it, slid down to the cold tile floor. Her hands shook. Her whole body shook. The baby kicked again, more gently this time. She stared at herself in the mirror across from her, 30 years old, 8 months pregnant, trapped in a mansion the size of a small hotel, married to a man who was planning her murder. The face looking back at her seemed foreign, pale, hollow. When had her cheeks become so thin? When had the light left her eyes? She counted the tiles on the bathroom floor. 1, 2, 3, 4. As if organization could rebuild what had just shattered. As if numbering the squares of Italian marble could make sense of the senseless. 12, 13, 14. Her breathing slowed. Her heart still raced, but her mind began to clear. She needed to think. She needed to plan. She needed to get out of this house before her baby was born. A knock on the door made her jump. "Sweetheart?" Douglas's voice was honey smooth, concerned, loving. The same voice that had promised her forever at the altar. "Are you in there? I heard something fall." Meredith pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. "I'm fine," she managed. Her voice came out steady, calm. She had not known she could lie so well. "Just a little morning sickness." At 4 in the afternoon, a gentle laugh. "Should I call Dr. Ashford?" "No, I just need a moment." "All right, sweetheart. I'll be in my study if you need me." His footsteps retreated down the hallway. The sound of the study door closing echoed through the house. Meredith stayed on the bathroom floor for 17 minutes. She counted every second. When she finally stood, her legs felt like water beneath her curtain, but her resolve had hardened into something cold and sharp. She washed her face, applied fresh lipstick, smoothed her maternity dress over her belly. The woman in the mirror looked almost normal now, almost like the happy pregnant wife everyone believed her to be. She would play that role, for now, until she could figure out how to escape. Dinner that evening was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Meredith sat at the long dining table, candles flickering between arrangements of white roses, and smiled at her husband across the expanse of polished mahogany. "You seem quiet tonight, darling." Douglas reached for his wine glass. Red, a 1992 Bordeaux from the family cellar. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired." Meredith pushed her salmon around her plate. The smell made her nauseous now in ways it never had before. "The baby's been very active today." Vivian dabbed her thin lips with a linen napkin. "That's a good sign. A healthy baby moves constantly in the final trimester." Meredith watched her mother-in-law cut her meat with surgical precision. This woman had raised Douglas, had shaped him into the man he was. Had she always been planning this? From the moment Douglas brought home a small-town girl with a trust fund and no living relatives? "Have you thought more about the nursery colors?" Vivian continued. "I still think the sage green would be more suitable than that yellow you chose." "I like the yellow," Meredith said. "It reminds me of my grandmother's house." "Your grandmother lived in a farmhouse in Nebraska." Vivian's smile did not reach her eyes. "Hardly the aesthetic we want for a Callahan heir." Douglas laughed, that easy, charming laugh that had made Meredith fall in love with him 6 years ago at a charity gala. "Now, Mother, let Mary have her yellow nursery. It's her first baby, after all." Her first baby, her only baby if they had their way. Movement caught Meredith's eye. Pauline Jennings, her best friend since college, was texting under the table. Her thumbs moved rapidly across the screen, her face carefully neutral. Pauline had arrived 3 days ago for an extended visit. To help with the baby preparations, she had said, to keep Meredith company in these final weeks. But now Meredith noticed how often Pauline disappeared for private phone calls, how she always seemed to know where Meredith was going before Meredith told her. A cold realization crept up Meredith's spine. After dinner, Douglas kissed her forehead in the library. "I have some calls to make, sweetheart." "Don't wait up." She watched him walk away. Broad shoulders, confident stride. The man she had promised to love until death parted them. Death, the word tasted different now. She waited until midnight, until the house fell silent and the security lights dimmed to their overnight settings. Then she crept down to Douglas's study. The door was locked, but she knew where he kept the spare key, behind the portrait of his grandfather in the hallway. She had seen him retrieve it once, years ago, when he forgot the original. The study smelled like leather and old money. Douglas's desk dominated the room, a massive piece of Victorian furniture that had been in the family for generations. The locked drawer on the right side had always been off limits. Private business documents, he had told her. The key was in his desk organizer. She found it on the third try. Inside the drawer, neat folders held the architecture of her destruction. Life insurance policies, her trust fund documents, medical records she had never seen, and at the bottom, a manila envelope with her name written in Douglas's handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. The life insurance policy inside made her stomach drop. $5 million. Beneficiary, Douglas Callahan. Secondary beneficiary, any living offspring. The policy was dated 3 days after she had announced her pregnancy. He had started planning her death before they had even picked a name for the baby. Meredith replaced everything exactly as she had found it, locked the drawer, returned the key, crept back to her bedroom like a ghost haunting her own home. Douglas was already there, pretending to sleep. She could tell by his breathing, too even, too controlled. She climbed into bed beside him, pulled the silk sheets up to her chin, stared at the ceiling while the man who wanted her dead snored softly beside her. She needed to run, but her keys were in the kitchen. Her phone was charging in the living room, and she was 8 months pregnant in a house full of people who wanted her dead. The baby kicked. Once, twice, 3 times. "I hear you," she thought. "I will get us out of here." I promised, but promises felt hollow in the dark. And dawn was still hours away. The morning sun painted the Callahan estate in shades of gold and honey. From the breakfast room windows, Meredith could see the manicured gardens stretching toward the distant tree line. Roses, hydrangeas, a hedge maze that Douglas's great-grandmother had designed a century ago. A beautiful prison. That was what this place had become. She sipped her decaffeinated coffee and watched Douglas read the morning paper. His brow furrowed at something in the business section, probably stock prices or merger news, the mundane concerns of a man who could plan his wife's murder between golf games. The Reynolds deal is falling through, he muttered. Winslow's people are circling again. Winslow, the name sent a chill through Meredith despite the warmth of the morning. She remembered the first time Douglas had mentioned Garrett Winslow. It was during their engagement, over champagne and candlelight. The Winslows are our oldest rivals, he had explained. Old money versus new money. They have been trying to destroy us for decades. Garrett especially. He is dangerous, Mary. Vindictive. Stay away from him. She had accepted this without question. Why would she doubt the man she loved? Now she wondered what else she had accepted without question. Who is Garrett Winslow, really? The words escaped before she could stop them. Douglas looked up from his paper. His blue eyes, so charming in the early days of their courtship, now seemed cold, calculating. Why do you ask? I just realized I do not know much about your family's history with his. You always change the subject when his name comes up. Douglas folded his newspaper with careful precision. The Winslows have been trying to destroy the Callahan family for 3 generations. Garrett's grandfather started it, something about a business deal gone wrong in the 1930s. Now Garrett has made it his personal mission to continue the grudge. But what did we do to the men? Nothing. We simply succeeded where they failed. Douglas reached across the table and took her hand. His touch felt different now, possessive rather than protective. You do not need to worry about the Winslows, sweetheart. I keep you safe from all of that. Safe. The word felt like a threat. Meredith remembered seeing Garrett Winslow once, 3 months ago, at a restaurant downtown. Douglas had steered her quickly past his table, but their eyes had met for a single moment. She had expected to see hatred in his gaze, contempt, the look of an enemy sizing up his target. Instead, she had seen something that puzzled her, something that looked almost like pity. At the time, she had assumed it was condescension, the arrogance of a billionaire looking down at a small-town girl who had married above her station. Now she wondered what he knew that she did not. I need to run some errands today, she announced. Prenatal yoga class at 10, then maybe some shopping for the nursery. Douglas's expression flickered, just for a moment, a shadow of something calculating passing behind his eyes. Why do you not take Pauline with you? She has been cooped up in the house 4 days. I would rather go alone. Some quiet time before the baby comes. Nonsense. Pauline would love the outing. Douglas's smile was warm, loving, completely false. Besides, I would worry about you driving alone this close to your due date. Meredith did not argue. She had learned long ago that arguing with Douglas was pointless. He always won. He always got what he wanted. She finished her coffee, kissed his cheek, went upstairs to change. Her car was a silver Mercedes sedan, a wedding gift from Vivian. Practical, her mother-in-law had said. Safe for a young mother. The engine would not start. Meredith turned the key again, and again. Nothing but a clicking sound and the faint smell of something wrong. Pauline appeared at the passenger window, her face arranged in sympathetic concern. Car trouble? It was fine yesterday. These things happen. I will call the mechanic. The mechanic arrived within the hour, a man named Frank who had worked for the Callahan family for 20 years. He poked around under the hood, made thoughtful noises, and delivered his verdict. Alternator is shot, ma'am. Gonna need a few days to get the part. Meredith watched him wipe his hands on a rag. It was working perfectly yesterday. Frank shrugged. These things happen. Those words again. These things happen, as if the universe randomly conspired to trap pregnant women in houses where their husbands plotted their deaths. She tried calling a taxi from the house phone. The line clicked and buzzed, then went dead. She tried again. Same result. Her cell phone was in her purse. She retrieved it and found the battery drained. Strange. She had charged it overnight. Is something wrong? Pauline had appeared again. Always appearing, always watching. My phone is dead. You can use mine. Pauline held out her device with a helpful smile. Where do you need to go? Meredith looked at her oldest friend, her college roommate, the maid of honor at her wedding. The woman who had held her hand through her grandmother's funeral and her first heartbreak and every crisis in between. I just wanted some fresh air, Meredith said. Never mind. That night, she lay awake listening to Douglas breathe. The moonlight cast strange shadows on the ceiling. The baby shifted restlessly inside her, perhaps sensing her mother's distress. Her mind kept returning to the conversation she had overheard. Complications during delivery are not uncommon. The words echoed like a prophecy. She thought about her mother, dead from cancer when Meredith was 19. Her father, gone in a car accident 3 years later. Her grandmother, the last of her family, passed peacefully in her sleep just before Meredith met Douglas. No one left to notice if she disappeared. No one left to ask questions. They had chosen her perfectly. A woman with a trust fund and no living relatives. A woman who would be mourned briefly and forgotten quickly. A woman whose death would raise no suspicions. But she was not dead yet. She slipped out of bed and padded to the bathroom, closed the door, sat on the cold tile floor and thought, there had to be a way out. There had to be someone she could trust. Garrett Winslow's face floated through her memory, that look of pity, those knowing eyes. Douglas said he was dangerous, vindictive, obsessed with destroying the Callahan family. But what if Douglas was lying? What if Garrett was not the enemy? What if he was the only one who knew the truth? Meredith pressed her palms against her belly. The baby kicked in response, a flutter of life in the darkness. I am not crazy, she thought. I know what I heard. They said my name. They said after the birth. They said accident. The words were not a question. They were a declaration. A line drawn in the sand of her consciousness. Tomorrow she would find a way to learn more about Garrett Winslow. She would discover why Douglas feared him so much. She would uncover the truth that everyone seemed determined to hide from her. She was not crazy. She was not paranoid. She was a woman fighting for her life and the life of her unborn child, and she would not go down without a fight. 3 days passed like 3 years. Meredith watched, listened, cataloged every suspicious glance and whispered conversation. The house that had once felt like a fairy tale castle now revealed itself as what it truly was, a trap designed to contain her until she was no longer useful. The car remained broken. The mechanic kept finding new problems, first the alternator, then the starter, then something with the transmission that required ordering special parts from Germany. Her phone worked again, but something felt wrong. Calls dropped at random moments. Messages failed to send. When she tried to access her bank accounts online, the passwords no longer worked. Technical difficulties, the bank representative explained over the phone. We are updating our systems. Try again in a few days. A few days. Everything was a few days, just long enough to keep her trapped until the baby came. She stood at her bedroom window and watched the gardeners trim the hedges below. Beyond the manicured grounds, the iron gate marked the boundary of the estate. A quarter-mile of private road separated the mansion from the public highway. Too far to walk, especially 8 months pregnant, especially in October, with the nights growing cold and the leaves beginning to fall. Pauline knocked on the door and entered without waiting for an answer. Ready for lunch? Rosemary made that soup you like. Meredith studied her friend's face, the carefully arranged smile, the slightly too wide eyes that never quite met her gaze. How had she never noticed the falseness before? Pauline, she kept her voice casual, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you remember when you introduced me to Douglas? Something flickered across Pauline's expression. At the charity gala, 6 years ago, you were so nervous about going to such a fancy event. You said we would be perfect together. Those were your exact words. Did I? Pauline laughed, a brittle sound. I do not remember. I do. You said it 3 times that night, before you introduced us, while we were dancing, and when he drove me home. Meredith watched Pauline's smile falter. It seemed so romantic at the time. My best friend playing matchmaker. Now I wonder if it was something else. What do you mean? Were you looking for him, Pauline, before the gala? Were you looking for a specific type of woman? Mary, you are scaring me, Pauline's voice rose. Is this about what you told me the other day? About what you think you heard outside the study? I know what I heard. You are 8 months pregnant, exhausted, hormonal. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. My mind is perfectly clear. Pauline stepped closer. Her hand touched Meredith's arm with the gentleness of a concerned friend. I think we should call Dr. Ashford. Pregnancy psychosis is a real condition. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Meredith jerked away. I'm not psychotic. No one said you were. But the things you are describing, thinking your husband wants to kill you, believing you are being held prisoner, these are not the thoughts of a healthy mind. The words hit like physical blows. Gaslighting, that was the term. She had read about it in a magazine article once, never imagining it would apply to her own life. I would like to be alone now, Meredith said. Pauline hesitated, then nodded. I will tell Douglas you are resting. He worries about you so much. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Meredith listened to her footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then she heard voices. Pauline's, Douglas's. Too quiet to make out the words, but the urgent tone was unmistakable. 20 minutes later, Douglas appeared in the bedroom doorway. His face wore an expression of deep concern, loving concern, the kind of concern a devoted husband would feel for his troubled wife. Sweetheart, he crossed the room and gathered her in his arms. Pauline told me you have been having some disturbing thoughts. Meredith let herself be held, limp, compliant, playing the role of the fragile pregnant woman they expected her to be. I'm just tired, she whispered against his chest. His cologne smelled expensive, like sandalwood and lies. Dr. Ashford is coming tomorrow. She is worried about your stress levels. We all are. Douglas pulled back and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheeks. I think it would be best if you rested in bed until the baby comes. Just a few more weeks. We can bring everything you need to the bedroom. Make it comfortable. Like a little vacation? Not a bedroom, a cell. Whatever you think is best, Meredith heard herself say. Douglas kissed her forehead. That is my good girl. He left her alone with the afternoon light slanting through the windows and the weight of her new prison settling around her. That night, Meredith lay awake for hours after Douglas fell asleep. The moonlight painted silver stripes across the Persian carpet. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, then 1, then 2. At 2:30, she heard footsteps in the corridor, soft, hesitant, stopping outside her door. She held her breath. A piece of paper slid under the door. Then the footsteps retreated. Meredith waited until silence returned to the house. Then she crept out of bed and retrieved the note. In the bathroom, with the door locked, she unfolded it beneath the dim light of a nightlight. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Small, cramped, written in haste. He knows you know. Be careful. Trust the enemy. No signature, no explanation. Just those cryptic words and a phone number scrawled at the bottom. Meredith read the note 3 times, then tore it into tiny pieces and flushed it down the toilet. Someone in this house was on her side. Someone who knew the truth and wanted her to survive. But who? And what did they mean by trust the enemy? The next morning brought Dr. Nora Ashford and her concerned frown. The obstetrician had been Meredith's doctor since the beginning of her pregnancy, a kind woman with graying hair and gentle hands. Your blood pressure is elevated, Dr. Ashford said, unwrapping the cuff from Meredith's arm, and you have lost weight since your last visit. In the final trimester, that is not ideal. I have not been sleeping well. Stress can be very harmful during pregnancy. Douglas tells me you have been having some troubling thoughts. Meredith looked at the doctor, at the concern in her eyes, at the genuine care in her expression. Should she tell her? Would Dr. Ashford believe her? She opened her mouth, closed it. Douglas was standing in the doorway, watching, listening. His presence a reminder of the bars on her gilded cage. Just normal pregnancy worries, Meredith said. First-time mother nerves. Dr. Ashford nodded. That is completely understandable, but I am going to recommend strict bed rest for the next 2 weeks, just until the baby comes. Plenty of fluids, gentle stretching, and try to limit your stress. Limited stress, as if she could turn off the fear like a faucet. After the doctor left, Douglas brought her lunch on a tray. Tomato soup, fresh bread, a small vase with a single rose. See how well we will take care of you. He set the tray on her lap. Everything you need. Right here. Meredith looked at the soup. Steam rose from its surface. The smell was wrong somehow. Not bad, just wrong. I'm not very hungry right now, she said. Maybe later. Douglas's smile tightened. Just for a moment. You need to eat, sweetheart. For the baby. I will. I just need to rest first. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. I will leave it here for when you are ready. She did not touch the soup. When Douglas returned an hour later to check on her, he found the bowl empty. He did not notice that she had poured it into the potted plant by the window. That night, alone in the darkness, Meredith thought about the woman she had been before. The trusting girl who believed in love and happy endings. The naive fool who thought marriage meant safety and partnership and forever. That woman was dead now, killed by 3 words whispered behind a study door. In her place, something new was being born. Something harder, stronger, more desperate. She would survive this. She would save her baby. She would find a way out. But first, she needed to understand who the enemy really was and why someone wanted her to trust him. The bedroom became her entire world. Douglas brought her meals. Pauline brought her books. Vivian brought her criticism dressed as concern. None of them brought her freedom. You look tired, dear, Vivian said on the 4th day of Meredith's confinement. She sat in the wingback chair by the window, her posture perfect, her silver hair immaculate. The pregnancy is taking its toll. I feel fine. You do not look fine. You look haggard. Vivian's eyes swept over her with the cold assessment of a judge examining evidence. I hope this will not affect the baby. Douglas was such a beautiful infant, perfect in every way. Meredith imagined picking up the bedside lamp and throwing it at her mother-in-law's head. The fantasy brought her a small, vicious comfort. The baby is healthy, she said instead. Dr. Ashford confirmed it. Doctors can be wrong. My cousin's wife had a perfectly healthy pregnancy until the final week. Then complications arose. The baby survived. The mother did not. Vivian paused. Let the words settle like poison. Childbirth is so dangerous, even in modern times. Meredith gripped the sheets. What an encouraging thing to say. I am simply preparing you for reality, dear. The Callahan women have always faced difficult deliveries. It runs in the blood. Another pause. Another knife twist. Of course, you are not technically a Callahan by blood. Perhaps you will be luckier. After Vivian left, Meredith screamed into her pillow. Silent. Primal. The only release she could afford. Rosemary Finch came that afternoon with fresh linens. The housekeeper was a quiet woman in her mid-50s with graying brown hair and watchful eyes. She had worked for the Callahan family for over 2 decades. Mrs. Callahan, she set the linens on the dresser. Is there anything else you need? Meredith studied her carefully. Rosemary had been the one to slip the note under her door. She was almost certain of it. Rosemary, she kept her voice low. Can I ask you something? The housekeeper's hands stilled on the sheets. Yes, ma'am. How long have you worked for this family? 23 years, ma'am. Have you ever seen it anything unusual? Rosemary's eyes met hers. Just for a moment, a flash of understanding passed between them. This house has many secrets, Mrs. Callahan. Some better left buried. She smoothed the pillowcase with careful hands. But some secrets refused to stay in their graves. Then she was gone, leaving Meredith with more questions than answers. That night, while pretending to sleep, Meredith heard Douglas on the phone in the hallway. His voice was hushed, urgent. No, she does not suspect anything specific. Just general paranoia, pregnancy hormones. A pause. The doctor is on board. Everything will happen naturally. No one will question it. Meredith pressed her fist against her mouth. The baby shifted inside her. Restless, afraid. 2 more weeks. That was what Douglas had said. 2 more weeks until her due date. 2 more weeks until they killed her. She had to find a way out before then. The next morning, she asked to use the bathroom. Douglas hovered outside the door while she went through the motions, brushing her teeth, washing her face, pretending everything was normal. Under the sink, taped to the pipes where no one would think to look, she found something that made her heart stop. A phone. Small, prepaid, the kind you bought at gas stations with cash. and a note in that same cramped handwriting. Call the number. He is waiting. Meredith tucked the phone into the waistband of her underwear, flushed the toilet for cover, washed her hands twice. When she emerged, Douglas was checking his own phone. Everything all right, sweetheart? Fine, just morning sickness again. At 2 in the afternoon? That gentle laugh, that concerned smile. We really should talk to Dr. Ashford about adjusting your medication. Medication. She had not known she was taking medication. The vitamins she swallowed every morning. Were they vitamins at all? I think I will skip the vitamins today, she said. They seem to upset my stomach. Something flickered in Douglas's eyes. The vitamins are important for the baby. I know, but maybe just for today. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Whatever makes you comfortable, sweetheart. That night, she hid the pills under her tongue, spit them out when Douglas was not looking, ground them to powder between her fingers, and scattered them in the carpet. She lay awake waiting for him to fall asleep, counting his breaths, timing the intervals between his small movements. At 3 in the morning, she slipped out of bed, crept to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the fan to cover any sound. The phone was fully charged. She dialed the number from the note with trembling fingers. It rang twice. Then a voice answered, deep, calm, controlled. Mrs. Callahan, I have been expecting your call. She recognized the voice from somewhere. A press conference, maybe, an interview she had half-watched while Douglas changed channels. Who is this? She whispered. My name is Garrett Winslow, and I believe you have finally discovered what kind of family you married into. The enemy, the man Douglas had warned her about for 6 years, the man she was supposed to fear. How do I know I can trust you? You do not, but you called anyway, which tells me you have run out of other options. A pause. Tell me what you know, Mrs. Callahan, and I will tell you what I know. Then we can decide together if trust is possible. Meredith sat on the cold bathroom floor and told him everything. The conversation she had overheard, the insurance policy, the broken car and dead phone, the vitamins that might not be vitamins, Pauline's betrayal, her mother-in-law's veiled threats. Garrett listened without interrupting. When she finished, his voice was soft, almost gentle. My sister's name was Charlotte, he said. She married Douglas's cousin Marcus 10 years ago. 8 months into her pregnancy, she died from complications during delivery. The baby survived. For 6 months. Then there was an accident. Meredith's blood turned to ice. They did the same thing to her, she whispered. They have been doing it for generations. The Callahan family builds its fortune on the bodies of young women with trust funds and no living relatives. You are not the first, Mrs. Callahan, but you could be the last. How? By surviving, by helping me expose them, by being the witness I have been waiting 15 years to find. The fan hummed overhead, the bathroom tiles pressed cold against her legs. The baby kicked inside her, demanding action, demanding life. What do I have to do? She asked. For now, nothing. Play along. Be the docile wife they expect. I am gathering evidence, building a case. When the time is right, I will get you out of there. When? Soon, I promise you, Mrs. Callahan, I will not let them hurt you. Not like they hurt Charlotte. She believed him, against all logic, against everything Douglas had taught her to think. She believed the enemy. My name is Meredith, she said. If we are going to bring down a murderous dynasty together, you should probably call me by my first name. For the first time, she heard something that might have been a smile in his voice. Meredith, get some rest. You are going to need your strength. She ended the call, hid the phone, returned to bed where Douglas still slept beside her. The man she had promised to love until death. They thought they controlled when it would come for her. They were wrong. The next morning, Meredith began her research. Douglas had left for a business meeting in the city. Vivian was attending her garden club. Pauline was sleeping late. For the first time in days, she had a few hours of relative freedom. She used the burner phone's limited internet to search for Garrett Winslow. The articles painted a picture of ruthlessness, hostile takeovers, corporate warfare, a billionaire who destroyed companies for sport. The Callahan family's greatest enemy, exactly as Douglas had always said, but she kept digging. Beneath the business headlines, she found other stories. A foundation that funded domestic violence shelters, whistleblower protection programs, Anonymous donations to women's causes that only surfaced when tax records were leaked. And 10 years ago, a lawsuit. Garrett Winslow versus Marcus Callahan and the Callahan Family Trust. Wrongful death, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. The case had been dismissed. Insufficient evidence. But the court documents told a story that echoed her own. Charlotte Winslow Callahan, 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, died from complications during delivery at a private hospital funded by the Callahan family. Her baby, a boy named Thomas, died 6 months later. A fall from a changing table while the nanny was out of the room. The nanny had been fired immediately, blamed publicly, discredited when she tried to speak out. Her name was mentioned only once in the documents. Susan Finch. Finch, like Rosemary Finch, the housekeeper who had slipped her the phone. The pieces clicked together like a lock finally opening. Meredith called Garrett that night. "I found the court documents," she said without preamble. "I found your sister's case." "Then you understand." Susan Finch, the nanny, was she related to Rosemary? Her younger sister. Susan was destroyed after Charlotte's death. The guilt of what she could not prevent, the accusations that she was responsible for Thomas's accident. She took her own life 3 years later. Meredith closed her eyes, and Rosemary stayed, all these years, waiting, watching, looking for someone like you, someone who survived long enough to see the truth. Why did she not just go to the police? She did, twice. The Callahans own the local police chief. They have judges on their payroll, senators in their pocket. Going through official channels is how Charlotte died and Susan was silenced. Garrett's voice hardened. The only way to bring them down is from the inside, with evidence they cannot suppress, and a witness they cannot discredit. Me. You, if you are willing. Meredith pressed her hand against her belly. The baby was still now, listening, trusting her mother to make the right choice. "What do you need?" "Documents, financial records, anything that links the insurance payouts to the family trust. Anything that shows a pattern." A pause. "And when the time comes, your testimony." "I can get the documents. Douglas keeps everything in his study." "Be careful. If they suspect you are onto them, they may accelerate their timeline." "I know." She did know. She felt the danger in every interaction, every false smile, every loving touch from a man who was counting the days until her death. "I am sending someone tomorrow, a woman named Eleanor Pierce. She will pose as a representative from your insurance company. Routine pregnancy check-in. Douglas will not suspect anything." "How will I know it is really her?" "She will ask about your grandmother's farmhouse, the one in Nebraska, the one you told Douglas reminded you of the yellow nursery." The detail struck her. He had been listening, not just to her fears, but to her memories, her hopes, the small pieces of herself that she had shared. "Garrett," she said his name carefully, testing how it felt. "Why are you doing this? Your sister died 10 years ago. You could have given up, moved on. Why keep fighting?" Silence stretched across the line. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he could not quite hide. "Because Charlotte was the only family I had left. Because she trusted the wrong people and died for it. Because every year that passes, another woman marries into that family. Another baby is born. Another life is stolen." He paused. "Because some debts can only be paid in justice." She believed him. A stranger trusted her word more than her husband, her best friend, her own mother-in-law. And she trusted him back. A man she had never met. A man she had been taught to fear. The enemy who was becoming her only hope. Eleanor Pierce arrived the next afternoon with a clipboard and a professional smile. Mid-40s, sensible shoes. The perfect disguise of corporate bureaucracy. "Mrs. Callahan, I am from Pacific Life Insurance. We like to do wellness checks with our expectant mothers." She glanced at Douglas, who hovered in the doorway. "It is perfectly routine, but the conversation is confidential." "Company policy." Douglas hesitated. "I would prefer to stay." "I understand, but our protocols require private discussion." HIPAA regulations. Eleanor's smile was pleasant but firm. "It will only take 20 minutes." After Douglas reluctantly withdrew, Eleanor's demeanor shifted. She sat across from Meredith with an intensity that belied her corporate costume. Your grandmother's farmhouse in Nebraska, she said quietly. The one that inspired the yellow nursery. Garrett sends his regards. Meredith exhaled. What do you need from me? Information first. Tell me everything you have observed. Every document, every conversation, every suspicious behavior. Meredith talked for 15 minutes straight. The insurance policies, the locked drawer, the broken car and malfunctioning phone, the vitamins that made her sleepy, Rosemary's notes, Pauline's betrayal. Eleanor took careful notes, asked precise questions. When Meredith finished, she leaned forward. We have been building this case for years, financial forensics, witness interviews, medical records, but we were missing one crucial element. What? A living witness who can connect all the pieces, someone inside the family who can testify to their methods. Eleanor's eyes met hers. Douglas was careful with Charlotte. He made sure she never suspected until it was too late. With you, he made a mistake. He let you hear the plan. How do I get out? The car is broken, the phones are monitored. There are guards now. Douglas calls them security for the baby. We are working on that. In the meantime, gather what evidence you can, the life insurance documents especially, financial records that show the pattern of deaths and payouts, and keep notes, dates, times, what was said, who was present. How much time do I have? Eleanor's expression flickered. Your due date is in 12 days. Based on what Garrett has learned, they plan to have you go into labor at the private hospital the family funds, the same one where Charlotte delivered. There will be complications. The doctors will do everything they can, but tragically, they will not be able to save you. 12 days, less than 2 weeks to live. I will get the documents tonight, Meredith said, while Douglas is at his charity board meeting. Be careful. One wrong move, and they will accelerate everything. I know, but I am tired of being careful. She pressed her hand against her belly. I am tired of being afraid. Eleanor stood, smoothed her skirt, resumed her corporate persona. The wellness check is complete. You appear to be progressing normally. We will be in touch. She left through the front door, past Douglas, who had been waiting in the hallway. Meredith watched them exchange polite goodbyes. Watched Douglas smile his charming smile. He was good at smiling. He had smiled at Charlotte too, probably, right up until the moment he killed her. That night, after Douglas left for his meeting, Meredith made her move. The study was locked, but she knew where the key was hidden, behind the grandfather portrait, just like before. She worked quickly, photographed every document in the locked drawer, the insurance policies, the trust fund paperwork, the medical records, and something new, a folder labeled estate planning containing documents that made her blood run cold, projected inheritance values for minor child following death of biological mother, guardianship provisions granting full control to Douglas Callahan and Vivian Callahan, a draft of her will that she had never seen, never signed, leaving everything to her unborn child and nothing to herself. They had thought of everything, every legal angle, every financial detail, everything except her refusal to die quietly. She photographed it all, sent the images to Garrett's secure server, replaced everything exactly as she had found it. Then she sat in Douglas's chair and let the rage wash over her. They had stolen her love, her trust, her belief in happy endings. They had targeted her from the beginning, selected her like cattle for slaughter. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated her. They had seen a naive small-town girl with a trust fund and no family. They had not seen the fighter underneath. She was done being a victim, done being afraid, done playing the docile wife they expected. It was time to fight back. 8 days until her due date. Meredith counted each one like a prisoner scratching marks on a cell wall. The baby had dropped lower in the past few days. The pressure in her pelvis was constant. Her body was preparing for birth. Her mind was preparing for battle. Garrett called every night at 3 in the morning. Brief conversations on the burner phone. Updates on the escape plan. Reassurances that help was coming. Eleanor has secured a safe location, he told her on the 5th night. A private medical facility run by a doctor who testified against the Callahans years ago. She lost her license when they came after her, but she still has her skills and her courage. When do we move? Soon. The timing has to be perfect. Too early and they will track you down. Too late and he did not need to finish the sentence. Douglas is getting suspicious, Meredith said. He watches me constantly, checks my phone, counts my vitamins. Have you been taking them? Hiding them, flushing them. Whatever is in those pills, I do not want it in my system. Good. The forensic team analyzed one of the samples Rosemary smuggled out. Mild sedatives mixed with something to thin your blood. They were preparing your body for the complications they planned to cause during delivery. Meredith pressed her hand against her stomach. The baby kicked, strong, alive. I will kill him, she whispered. When this is over, I will kill him myself. No, Garrett's voice was firm. You will survive. You will testify. You will watch him spend the rest of his life in prison. That is how we win. Not through violence, through justice. Justice. Such a clean word for such a dirty business. When? She asked again. 2 nights from now, Thursday. Douglas has a business dinner in Boston. He will be gone until Friday morning. That gives us a window. Pauline will be watching me. Rosemary will handle Pauline. She knows what to do. And the guards? There is a gap in their rotation at 2:15 in the morning. The shift change creates a 4-minute window. That is when you move. 4 minutes. Her life and her baby's life measured in 4 minutes. I will be ready. Yeah, I am. My. Oh, wow, she said, I know you will. The next 2 days stretched into eternity. Meredith played her role with desperate precision. The tired pregnant wife, the docile patient, the woman too exhausted to cause trouble. Douglas kissed her goodbye on Thursday afternoon. I wish I did not have to go, sweetheart, but this meeting is important. I understand. Pauline will take care of you, and the security team is just outside if you need anything. I know. He studied her face, looking for something, suspicion, fear, evidence of the rebellion brewing beneath her skin. She gave him nothing, just the blank bovine expression of a woman who had accepted her fate. I love you, he said. The words tasted like ash, but she smiled. I love you too. She watched from the window as his car disappeared down the driveway. The gates closed behind him. The trap that had held her for months was about to spring open. Rosemary brought her dinner at 6. Vegetable soup, good for the baby. Meredith looked at the tray, at the carefully prepared meal, at the small piece of paper hidden under the napkin. Thank you, Rosemary. Rest well tonight, Mrs. Callahan. Tomorrow is a new day. The note contained simple instructions: where to go, what to bring, how to move through the house without triggering the security sensors. At 9 o'clock, Pauline came to say goodnight. Are you sure you do not want company? I could sleep in the chair. I am fine, just tired. Douglas would want me to keep an eye on you. Douglas is not here. The words came out sharper than intended. Meredith softened her tone. Really, Pauline, I am fine. Just going to sleep early. Pauline hesitated at the door. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or doubt. I never wanted to hurt you, Mary. You know that, right? I was just... They promised me things, money, security, a future I could not have built on my own. I know, Pauline. And she did know. She understood desperation, the willingness to do terrible things when the alternative was worse. Good night. The door closed. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Meredith waited, watched the clock, counted the minutes until 2:15. At midnight, Rosemary appeared with a cup of tea. For Pauline, she said, to help her sleep. The tea would be drugged, Meredith knew. Not enough to hurt, just enough to ensure Pauline did not wake until morning. At 1:30, Meredith began to prepare. She dressed in dark clothes, comfortable shoes, a coat that still fit over her enormous belly. She packed a small bag with the essentials: documents, the burner phone, her grandmother's locket, the only piece of jewelry she truly cared about. At 2:10, she crept out of the bedroom, down the back stairs, through the kitchen, to the servants' entrance that opened onto the garden. Rosemary was waiting there, her face pale in the moonlight, her hands steady despite the danger. Through the hedge maze, Rosemary whispered, there is a gap in the fence at the northwest corner. Mr. Winslow's car will be waiting on the other side. Thank you, Rosemary, for everything. Thank me by surviving. Thank me by telling the world what this family has done. Rosemary's eyes glistened. Thank me by living the life my sister never got to have. Meredith hugged her, briefly, fiercely. Then she stepped into the darkness. The hedge maze had always frightened her. Too many shadows, too many ways to get lost. But tonight she navigated it like she had grown up within its walls, left at the first turn, right at the second. Straight through the center where the fountain stood silent and dry. The gap in the fence was exactly where Rosemary had promised, a loose board that swung aside with a gentle push. On the other side, a black SUV waited with its lights off. The driver's door opened as she approached. Garrett Winslow stepped out. She recognized him from the newspapers. Tall, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, eyes that held a weight of grief and determination. Meredith, he spoke her name like a promise. We need to move. She climbed into the passenger seat. The leather was soft, the air conditioning hummed, normal sounds, safe sounds. She had forgotten what safety felt like. Garrett pulled away from the estate without turning on the headlights. The road was dark, empty. The trees pressed close on either side. How far? She asked. 45 minutes to the safe house. Dr. Mathis is waiting with a full medical team. Thank you for believing me, for helping me. He glanced at her. In the dim light, she could see the ghost of his sister in his eyes, the memory of another pregnant woman who had trusted the wrong people. Do not thank me yet. We are not safe until you are in custody of people who will protect you, people the Callahans cannot reach. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. The highway stretched ahead of them, empty, peaceful, deceptively calm. Then Meredith felt it, a pressure in her abdomen. Not painful, not yet, but insistent. Familiar from the books she had read and the classes she had taken, she pressed her hand against her belly, felt the tightening, the release, the tightening again. Garrett, what is it? I think my water just broke. She looked down. The seat beneath her was wet. The contractions were coming faster now, closer together. The baby was not waiting for a safe house. The baby was coming now. The hospital, she gasped. We need to get to a hospital. The hospitals around here are full of Callahan donors. Their people are everywhere. Then what do we do? Garrett's hands tightened on the wheel. Dr. Mathis, she is 40 minutes away. Can you make it? Another contraction hit, harder this time. She gripped the dashboard and breathed through the pain. I do not think I have a choice. He pressed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed, 80, 90. The night blurred past the windows. Hold on, Meredith, just hold on. We are almost there. She held on. To the dashboard. To her belly. To the hope that had carried her through weeks of terror. She was not going to die in a Callahan hospital with their doctors and their complications. She was going to live. She was going to meet her daughter. She was going to watch Douglas rot in prison. Another contraction. She screamed into the darkness. Almost there, Garrett said. Almost there. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It came in waves, cresting, breaking, retreating just long enough for her to catch her breath before the next one crashed over her. The SUV raced through the night while Meredith gripped the door handle and tried not to scream. 5 more minutes, Garrett said. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Dr. Mathis is ready. She has everything you need. Another contraction. Meredith panted through it, counted the seconds, tried to remember the breathing exercises from her prenatal classes. In, out, in, out. The classes had not prepared her for this. The fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that her husband wanted her dead and her baby was coming regardless. Tell me about Charlotte, she gasped between contractions. Tell me about your sister. Garrett was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old grief. She was the best person I knew. Kind, funny, too trusting. She saw the good in everyone, even Marcus, even when everyone warned her that the Callahans were dangerous. She loved him. She thought she did. He was charming, attentive, everything a lonely young woman could want. By the time she realized what he really was, it was too late. Another contraction, Meredith cried out. Tears streamed down her face. Almost there, Garrett said. Almost there. The private medical facility was hidden at the end of a dirt road, a converted farmhouse surrounded by trees, no signs, no lights visible from the main road. Garrett helped her out of the car. She leaned on him heavily, her legs barely supporting her weight. A woman appeared in the doorway, gray-haired, stern-faced, with the bearing of someone who had seen too much and refused to look away. Dr. Mathis, she is in active labor. I can see that. The doctor took Meredith's other arm. How far apart are the contractions? 3 minutes, maybe less. Then we do not have much time. They brought her inside. The medical equipment was modern, sterilized, professional, a full delivery suite hidden in the middle of nowhere. How is this possible? Meredith asked between gasps. I lost my license because I told the truth about Charlotte Callahan's death, but I never stopped being a doctor. Dr. Mathis helped her onto the examination table, and I never stopped preparing for this day. The next few hours blurred together, pain and pressure. Brief moments of rest followed by waves of agony. Dr. Mathis and her team moved with quiet efficiency, checking vitals, monitoring the baby, guiding Meredith through each stage of labor. Between contractions, she thought about her mother, gone too soon from a cancer that had spread before anyone noticed. She thought about her grandmother, the farmhouse in Nebraska, the yellow kitchen where she had learned to bake and laugh and believe in happy endings. She thought about Douglas, the man she had loved, the man who had never loved her back. Only her money, only her trust fund, only her willingness to stay when he needed her to. You are doing great, Dr. Mathis said. The baby is in position. A few more pushes. Meredith pushed, screamed, pushed again, and then she heard it. The sound that changed everything, a cry high and thin and perfect. It is a girl. Dr. Mathis held up the baby, red-faced, squalling, alive. Meredith sobbed as they placed the baby on her chest. Tiny fingers, tiny toes. I squeezed shut against the light of a world she was just beginning to know. Hello, my love, Meredith whispered. Hello, Charlotte Rose. Named for the aunt she would never meet, named for the woman whose death had made this moment possible. Garrett appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, exhausted, but something like chow flickered in his eyes. She is beautiful, he said. She is alive. Meredith looked at him through tears. We are both alive. For now, Dr. Mathis's voice cut through the moment. But we need to move. Douglas has discovered you are gone. His people are searching. Reality crashed back like a wave of ice water. The danger was not over. The Callahans would be hunting her, would stop at nothing to retrieve their heir and silence the witness who could destroy them. How much time do we have? Garrett asked. An hour, maybe less. They have already checked the obvious locations. It will not take them long to find this place. Meredith looked at her daughter, at the perfect bow of her lips, the delicate curve of her ears. She had just given birth. Her body was exhausted. Every muscle ached. The thought of running again made her want to weep. But she would run. She would crawl if she had to. She would do whatever it took to keep this child safe. Where do we go? She asked. My estate, Garrett said. It is the one place they cannot reach. Security, legal protection, and something else. What? Journalists, a room full of them, waiting to hear your story. Meredith understood then. This was never just about escape. It was about exposure. Taking the Callahans down in a way they could not recover from. They will discredit me, she said. Call me crazy. Say it is pregnancy psychosis. They will try on. Garrett's jaw tightened. But we have evidence they cannot dismiss. Financial records, medical documents, and the testimony of every woman they have silenced over the years. Rosemary, Dr. Mathis, others who were waiting for someone brave enough to speak first. Brave, she did not feel brave. She felt terrified, exhausted, overwhelmed by the responsibility of keeping another human being alive. But she thought of Charlotte Winslow, of Susan Finch, of all the women who had been destroyed by the Callahan family's greed. Someone had to stop them. Someone had to stand up and say no more. Get me to your estate, she said, and I will tell them everything. They moved her to a waiting ambulance, a real one, staffed by people Garrett trusted. Dr. Mathis stayed with her, monitoring her vitals, checking the baby, making sure they were both strong enough to survive what came next. The drive took 30 minutes. Meredith held Charlotte Rose against her chest and watched the sun begin to rise through the ambulance windows, pink and gold streaking across the sky. A new day, a new beginning. She had entered the Callahan mansion as a wife, a victim, a woman who trusted too easily and questioned too little. She was leaving as something else entirely, a mother, a survivor, a witness to crimes that had been hidden for generations. Let them come, she thought. Let them try to silence me now. She pressed her lips against her daughter's soft head and made a silent promise. I will protect you. I will fight for you. I will burn their empire to the ground if that is what it takes to keep you safe. The ambulance turned onto a private road. Gates opened before them. Security guards nodded as they passed. Garrett's estate spread across the hillside like a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, a mansion that made the Callahan house look modest by comparison. And in front of the main entrance, a crowd of people. Cameras, microphones, reporters waiting for the story of a lifetime. Are you ready? Garrett asked. Meredith looked at her daughter, at the man who had saved them both, at the future stretching out before her like an unwritten page. I have been ready my whole life, she said. I just did not know it until now. The media room was chaos-controlled. Cameras flashed. Microphones jockeyed for position. Journalists shouted questions that overlapped into incomprehensible noise. But behind a long table at the front of the room, Meredith sat in perfect stillness. Charlotte Rose slept in a bassinet beside her, 12 hours old and already the most famous baby in the country. Garrett stood at the podium, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. What you are about to hear will shock you. It will disturb you. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about one of America's oldest and most respected families. He paused. Let the silence build. But every word is documented. Every claim is supported by evidence. And the woman beside me risked her life to bring you the truth. The doors at the back of the room burst open. Douglas Callahan strode in with an army at his back. Lawyers, police officers, his mother Vivian in her impeccable suit and pearls. This woman is mentally unstable, Douglas announced. His voice carried the confident authority of a man who had always gotten what he wanted. She fled our home in the middle of the night with our unborn child. She is suffering from pregnancy psychosis and needs immediate medical attention. Cameras swung between them. The journalists smelled blood in the water. The police are here to take her into protective custody, Douglas continued, for her own safety and the safety of our daughter. Meredith stood. Her body ached, her legs trembled, but her voice was steady. I heard you, Douglas, through the study door. You and your mother, planning my death. Sweetheart, please. Douglas's face arranged itself into perfect concern. You were exhausted, hearing things that were not there. Pregnancy hormones can cause complications during delivery are not uncommon. That is what Vivian said. Meredith met his eyes, held them, refused to look away. You plan to have me die giving birth, just like Charlotte Winslow died, just like Marcus's wife before her, just like every woman who has had the misfortune of marrying into your family with money and no relatives. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The cameras kept rolling. She is delusional, Vivian said. Her voice dripped with contempt. This is what happens when you let small-town nobodies into good families. They cannot handle the pressure. Then explain this. Garrett pressed a button. Behind him, a screen flickered to life. Documents appeared. Life insurance policies, trust fund transfers, death certificates. A pattern spanning 3 generations. 17 women, Garrett said. 17 pregnant wives who died from complications during childbirth. Every single one had a trust fund. Every single one had no living relatives. Every single one left behind a child who died before reaching adulthood. The room went silent. Even the clicking cameras stilled. That is fabricated evidence, Douglas said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Anyone can create documents. Can they create this? Garrett pressed another button. A recording played, Douglas's voice, Vivian's voice. The conversation Meredith had overheard through the study door. After the birth, obviously, we are not monsters. The insurance policy is already adjusted. Preston handled it last week. Complications during delivery are not uncommon for first-time mothers her age. Douglas's face went white. Vivian's composure cracked for the first time. That recording is illegal, one of the lawyers sputtered. It is inadmissible. She recorded a private conversation without consent. I did not record it, Meredith said. Rosemary Finch did. She has been gathering evidence for 15 years, since your family destroyed her sister. Another murmur, louder this time. A man stepped forward from the back of the room, gray-haired, distinguished, familiar. Preston Hayes, the Callahan family attorney. I need to make a statement, he said. His voice was heavy with decades of guilt. Regarding what I have witnessed in my 20 years with this family. Preston, do not. Vivian's command came sharp and cold. Remember who pays your bills. I remember everything, Mrs. Callahan. That is the problem. He turned to face the cameras. I drew up the insurance policies. I structured the trust transfers. I looked the other way while people died. His voice cracked. God help me, I looked the other way. The police officers who had come to arrest Meredith exchanged uncertain glances. Their orders had been clear, but the evidence mounting in front of them told a different story. Douglas made one last desperate play. He strode toward Meredith, arms outstretched, face arranged in loving concern. Sweetheart, please. This has gone far enough. Come home. We can work this out. He reached for her, that familiar gesture, the one that used to make her feel cherished, the one that now made her skin crawl. Do not touch me, she said, and for the first time in their marriage, he obeyed. The arrest happened quickly after that. State police arrived. Federal agents closed behind. The local officers who had been loyal to the Callahans stepped aside as their authority was superseded by people who could not be bought. Douglas was handcuffed in front of the cameras he had hoped would capture his triumphant rescue of a troubled wife. Vivian was led away with her hands behind her back, her perfect composure finally shattered. Pauline tried to slip out a side door. Security stopped her. She would face charges too. Conspiracy, fraud, accessory to attempted murder. Through it all, Charlotte Rose slept peacefully in her bassinet, unaware that her first day of life had been the last day of an empire. Meredith watched them take Douglas away. She waited for something, satisfaction, relief, vindication. Instead, she felt hollow, empty, as if a part of her had been carved out and would never grow back. Garrett appeared at her side. How do you feel? I do not know. She pressed her palm against her daughter's back, felt the small heartbeat, the gentle rise and fall of breath. I thought I would feel happy, or at least relieved. You have been running on adrenaline for weeks. The crash takes time. He hesitated. You are safe now, Meredith. They cannot hurt you anymore. Safe. She was not sure she remembered what that felt like. The journalists continued their questions. The cameras continued their recording. The story would dominate the news cycle for weeks, months. The Callahan family's dark secrets exposed for all the world to see. But Meredith was done performing, done being the brave witness, done being anything other than a mother holding her newborn daughter. I need to rest, she said. Garrett nodded. There is a suite prepared for you. Private, secure. Stay as long as you need. He led her through the chaos, past the reporters shouting questions, past the photographers seeking one more shot, into the quiet of a hallway lined with old paintings and older money. The suite was beautiful. Soft bed, clean sheets, a window overlooking gardens that stretched toward distant mountains. Meredith sat in the rocking chair by the window, held Charlotte Rose against her chest, watched the sun climb higher in the morning sky. She had lost a husband, a best friend, the life she thought she wanted. But she had gained something else, something she had never expected, a family that had chosen her, a future she would build with her own hands, a daughter who would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for her. The tears came then, silent, steady, washing away the fear and the anger and the grief. She let them fall. She let herself break, because sometimes you had to shatter completely before you could begin to rebuild. The courthouse stood like a monument to truth in the center of downtown. Meredith had passed this building 100 times during her marriage, had never imagined she would one day walk through its marble halls as the key witness in the trial of the century, had never imagined she would sit in the hard wooden chair of the witness stand and tell the world what her husband had planned to do to her. But here she was, 3 months into a trial that had captivated the nation, 6 days into her own testimony, and finally, mercifully, approaching the end. Mrs. Callahan, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Diana Reeves, stood before her with a folder of documents. I would like to return to the night of October 17th, the night you escaped from the Callahan estate. Meredith took a breath. She had told this story so many times now, to investigators, to grand juries, to the packed courtroom that hung on her every word. But each telling still felt like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to heal. I left at 2:15 in the morning, she said. Her voice was steady. She had learned to keep it steady. Through the servants' entrance, across the garden, through the hedge maze to the gap in the fence. And who helped you escape? Rosemary Finch, the housekeeper. She had been gathering evidence against the family for 15 years, since they destroyed her sister. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The journalists scribbled furiously. The cameras captured every expression on Meredith's face. She did not look at Douglas, had not looked at him once during the entire trial, could not bear to see the face of the man who had promised to love her and instead had planned her death. But she felt his eyes on her. Cold, hateful, the eyes of a predator watching prey that had somehow escaped. What happened after you reached the fence? Diana asked. Garrett Winslow was waiting for me. He drove me to a safe location, a private medical facility where I could deliver my baby without fear of being killed. Objection. Douglas's attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Crane, rose from his seat. The witness is speculating about events that never occurred. Overruled. Judge Margaret Chen did not even look up from her notes. The witness is describing her state of mind, which is relevant to her actions. Meredith continued, My water broke during the drive. I went into labor. Charlotte Rose was born at 6:47 the next morning. And what happened after the birth? Mr. Winslow brought me to his estate, where I gave my testimony to the journalists who had been waiting for this story for over a decade. Diana nodded. She walked to the evidence table and retrieved a large photograph. I would like to enter into Evidence Exhibit 47, a photograph of the documents Mrs. Callahan discovered in her husband's study. The image appeared on the courtroom screens: insurance policies, trust fund transfers, medical records. The architecture of murder, laid bare for all to see. Can you describe what we are looking at? Diana asked. My life insurance policy increased to $5 million 3 days after I announced my pregnancy. Beneficiary Douglas Callahan. Secondary beneficiary any living offspring. Meredith paused. Let the words sink in. There are also trust fund documents showing how my inheritance would transfer to my child upon my death, and then to Douglas and Vivian as guardians. And what did you conclude from these documents? That my husband married me for my money, that he planned to kill me after I gave birth, and that he would then control my daughter's inheritance until she was old enough to suffer the same fate. The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order was restored, but the damage was done. The truth hung in the air like smoke from a fire that could not be extinguished. Richard Crane approached for cross-examination. His face wore the confident smile of a man who had won impossible cases before, who believed he could win this one too. Mrs. Callahan, you claim to have overheard a conversation between your husband and his mother, a conversation in which they allegedly discussed your death. I did not claim to overhear it. I heard it. Through a closed door, in a house where you admit you were exhausted and stressed from pregnancy. I know what I heard. Do you? Pregnancy can cause auditory hallucinations, confusion, paranoia. Your own doctor expressed concerns about your mental state. My doctor was deceived by my husband, just like I was, just like everyone was. Crane smiled, the smile of a shark circling wounded prey. You also claim that your best friend of 15 years was secretly working against you, that your mother-in-law orchestrated your marriage, that an entire family conspired to murder you for money. Yes. Does that not sound paranoid to you, Mrs. Callahan? Does that not sound like the delusions of a woman suffering from pregnancy psychosis? Meredith looked at him, at his expensive suit and perfect hair, and absolute certainty that he could twist the truth into something unrecognizable. I thought I was crazy too, she said quietly. For a long time, I doubted myself, questioned my own sanity. Wondered if everyone was right and I was just a hormonal pregnant woman imagining threats that did not exist. She paused. Let the silence build. But then I found the documents, the insurance policies, the pattern of deaths, the recording that Rosemary made of my husband discussing my murder like it was a business transaction. Her voice hardened. That is not paranoia, Mr. Crane. That is evidence. And no amount of gaslighting from you or your client will change what I know to be true. The courtroom was silent. Even Crane seemed momentarily stunned. No further questions, he said. Meredith stepped down from the witness stand. Her legs felt weak. Her hands trembled. But she had done it. She had told her truth to the world. Now it was up to the jury to decide what to do with it. The remaining weeks of the trial passed in a blur of testimony and evidence and legal arguments that seemed to stretch into infinity. Witness after witness took the stand, each one ending another piece to the puzzle of Callahan family crimes. Preston Hayes testified for 3 days, the family attorney who had finally found his conscience. He described the insurance policies he had drafted, the trust fund transfers he had structured, the questions he had refused to ask because the answers were too terrible to contemplate. I knew, he said, his voice cracking. On some level, I knew, but I told myself it was coincidence. Bad luck, the universe being cruel to the good people. He wiped his eyes. I was a coward. I looked away because looking directly at the truth would have cost me everything. My career, my reputation, my comfortable life. And now, Diana asked, now I have lost all of those things anyway, but at least I can sleep at night. At least I can look at myself in the mirror without feeling sick. Rosemary Finch testified next, the quiet housekeeper who had spent 15 years gathering evidence while pretending to be invisible. My sister Susan was Charlotte Winslow's nanny, she said. She loved that baby like her own. When Charlotte died in childbirth, Susan was devastated, but she stayed for baby Thomas because someone had to protect him. What happened to Thomas? Diana asked. He died 6 months later. They said he fell from a changing table while Susan was out of the room. Rosemary's voice hardened. But Susan was never out of the room. She was in the bathroom, 10 feet away. She heard him crying and came running. By the time she got there, he was on the floor. And Vivian Callahan was standing over him with the strangest expression on her face. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Susan tried to tell someone, the police, the doctors, anyone who would listen. But no one believed her. The Callahans made sure of that. They destroyed her reputation, called her unstable, blamed her for Thomas's death. Rosemary's eyes glistened. 3 years later, she took her own life, left a note saying she could not live with the guilt of failing to protect that baby. And that is when you decided to stay? That is when I decided to fight, in the only way I could, by watching, listening, gathering evidence, waiting for someone to survive long enough to use it. Dr. Mathis testified about the medical forensics, the pattern of complications during delivery that were statistically impossible without intervention, the blood thinners that had been found in Meredith's vitamin supplements, the drug cocktail designed to make her hemorrhage during childbirth. In my professional opinion, she said, Mrs. Callahan would have died within hours of giving birth if she had delivered at the hospital the Callahans had chosen. The drugs in her system, combined with the procedures that were scheduled, would have caused catastrophic bleeding that could not have been stopped. And the other women? The previous wives who died in similar circumstances? I have reviewed the medical records of 7 of them. The pattern is identical. Blood thinners administered without documentation, scheduled procedures that increase bleeding risk, and in every case, the attending physician was someone with financial ties to the Callahan family. Eleanor Pierce revealed her true identity as an undercover federal agent. She had been investigating the Callahans for 5 years, posing as an insurance representative, building relationships with potential witnesses, waiting for the break that would finally bring the family down. Mrs. Callahan's survival was the key, she testified. We had evidence, we had suspicions, but we needed a living witness who could connect all the pieces. Someone who had seen the conspiracy from the inside and lived to tell about it. And you found that witness? Eleanor looked at Meredith. Their eyes met across the courtroom. No, she said, and she found us. She had the courage to reach out to the one person everyone told her was her enemy. and that courage saved her life. The defense called their own witnesses, character references who praised Douglas's generosity and charm, medical experts who questioned the forensic analysis, psychiatrists who suggested that Meredith suffered from delusions and persecution complexes. But the evidence was overwhelming. Document after document, recording after recording, a trail of bodies stretching back 3 generations. On the final day of testimony, Douglas himself took the stand. He was still handsome, still charming, still possessed of that easy confidence that had made Meredith fall in love with him 6 years ago at a charity gala. "I loved my wife," he said. His voice was smooth, sincere, the voice of a man who had spent his entire life lying and never once been caught. "Everything I did was to protect her and our baby." "Then why the insurance policies?" Diana asked. "Why the increased coverage?" "Standard practice. Every expectant father wants to make sure his family is provided for in case something happens." "And the conversation your wife overheard? The one where you discussed her death as an unfortunate accident?" Douglas smiled. That familiar smile. The one that had once made Meredith feel safe and cherished. "My mother and I were discussing a business matter. A property deal that had gone wrong. An unfortunate accident with the title transfer." Meredith heard fragments of a conversation and jumped to conclusions. Pregnancy hormones, you understand. She was not herself in those final months. "And the recording? The one where you specifically mentioned complications during delivery?" "Taken out of context, we were discussing the family history of difficult births, expressing concern for Meredith's safety." Douglas looked directly at the jury. "I wanted my wife to have the best possible care. I was worried about her. I loved her." He was good. Meredith had to admit that. He was very, very good at this. But the jury had heard everything else. The documents, the testimony, the pattern that stretched back decades. And when Diana played the recording one final time, letting Douglas's own words hang in the air of the courtroom, even his charm could not explain away what he had said. "After the birth, obviously, we are not monsters. Complications during delivery are not uncommon for first-time mothers her age." The jury deliberated for 2 days. Meredith spent those days at Garrett's estate, pacing, waiting, trying not to think about what would happen if the jury believed Douglas's lies, if the Callahan money and influence proved stronger than the truth. Charlotte Roast was blissfully unaware of the stakes. She crawled across the nursery floor, chasing a ball that Rosemary rolled to her, laughing at nothing, finding joy in the simple miracle of being alive. "Whatever happens," Garrett said on the second evening, "you have already won. The world knows the truth now. The Callahan name is destroyed. Their fortune is frozen, their powers broken. But if he goes free, he will not go free. The evidence is too strong, the testimony too damning." Garrett paused. "And if by some miracle he does walk out of that courtroom, I will spend the rest of my life making sure he never hurts anyone again." Meredith looked at him, at the man she had been taught to fear, the enemy who had become her salvation. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help me? You did not know me. Had no reason to believe I was telling the truth." Garrett was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old grief. "Because I saw my sister in you, the same fear in your eyes, the same desperation, the same certainty that no one would ever believe you." He paused. "I failed, Charlotte. I knew something was wrong, and I did not act quickly enough. I will not make that mistake again." "You did not fail her. The system failed her. The people who were supposed to protect her failed her. And I was one of those people, her big brother, the one who was supposed to keep her safe." He looked at Charlotte Rose, sleeping peacefully in her crib. "I cannot bring Charlotte back, but I can make sure her death meant something, that it led to justice, that it saved other women from the same fate." The call came the next morning. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed. Standing room only, reporters from every major network. Cameras broadcasting live to millions of viewers around the world. Meredith sat in the gallery with Garrett on one side and Rosemary on the other. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Douglas stood at the defense table. His suit was immaculate, his posture confident, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of fear that she had never seen before. "Good," she thought. "Now he knows how I felt." Judge Chen addressed the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, how do you find the defendant? Silence. Endless, agonizing silence. Guilty. The word exploded through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Meredith's hands flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Beside her, Rosemary sobbed openly. On the charge of fraud in the first degree? Guilty. On the charge of racketeering? Guilty. Douglas's face went white. His confident posture crumbled. For the first time in his life, charm and money and family connections could not save him. On the charge of attempted murder? Guilty, Vivian screamed, a high, thin sound of pure rage. Security had to restrain her as she lunged toward the jury box. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Douglas Callahan, 25 years to life. No possibility of parole for at least 20 years. Vivian Callahan, 15 years. Eligible for parole in 10. Marcus Callahan, arrested in connection with Charlotte Winslow's death, was tried separately. Found guilty, 30 years. 3 other family members were implicated in the conspiracy. 2 pleaded guilty to lesser charges. 1 went to trial and lost. The Callahan empire, built over 3 generations on the bodies of innocent women, finally crumbled to dust. Meredith watched from the gallery as they led Douglas away in handcuffs. He looked at her as he passed. His eyes held something she had never seen before. Not regret, not remorse. Just the cold fury of a man who had lost everything and blamed everyone but himself. She did not flinch, did not look away, did not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. You tried to kill me, she thought. You failed, and now you will spend the rest of your life paying for what you did. The doors closed behind him. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The whole world wanted a piece of the woman who had brought down a dynasty. But Meredith was done performing, done being the brave witness, done being anything other than a mother who wanted to hold her daughter. She pushed through the crowd, ignored the questions, found her way to the private room where Charlotte Rose waited with a trusted nanny. Her daughter looked up as she entered, smiled that toothless baby smile that made everything else disappear. Mama, Charlotte said, her first word, spoken for the first time in that moment, as if she knew that something important had just happened. Meredith sank to her knees, gathered her daughter in her arms. Let the tears come. They had won, against all odds, against all the money and power and influence that the Callahans could bring to bear. They had won. But victory felt hollow somehow, empty. The people she had lost could not be brought back. The trust that had been broken could not be repaired. The innocence she had carried into her marriage was gone forever. Garrett found her there, still on her knees, still holding Charlotte Rose, still crying. He did not say anything, just sat down beside her, put his arm around her shoulders, let her grieve for the woman she used to be and the life she had thought she would have. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes presence was more powerful than words. Outside, the world celebrated, justice served, evil punished. A fairy tale ending for the woman who had escaped the monster. But Meredith knew better. There were no fairy tale endings. Only moments of grace in the midst of chaos. Only small victories in the long war of living. She would take what she could get, and she would keep fighting. For Charlotte Rose, for Charlotte Winslow, for all the women who had never had a chance to tell their stories. The trial was over. The verdict was in. The Callahans were destroyed. Now came the hard part, the part that no one talked about. Learning how to live again. 1 year later, the farmhouse in Nebraska stood exactly as Meredith remembered from her childhood. White clapboard siding, weathered by decades of prairie wind, green shutters that her grandfather had painted the summer before he died, a wraparound porch where her grandmother had taught her to shell peas and tell stories and believe in the fundamental goodness of the world. She had bought it back from the strangers who had owned it since her grandmother's death, had spent months restoring it room by room, painting the kitchen yellow like it had been when she was a little girl, planting roses in the garden where her mother had planted roses before her, building a swing set in the backyard where Charlotte Rose would someday learn to pump her legs and touch the sky. Home. The word finally meant something again. Meredith stood at the kitchen window and watched her daughter toddle across the grass, 14 months old now, walking with the unsteady determination of someone who had recently discovered that falling down was not the end of the world. Charlotte Rose had her father's auburn hair, but her eyes were all Meredith, green flecked with gold, full of curiosity and wonder and absolutely no knowledge of the darkness that had surrounded her birth. She would learn someday, when she was old enough to understand. Meredith would tell her the truth about her father, about the family she had been born into, about the courage it had taken to escape. But not yet. For now, Charlotte Rose was allowed to be simply a child, chasing butterflies and picking dandelions and believing that the world was a safe and beautiful place. The screen door creaked open behind her. Rosemary came in with a basket of tomatoes from the garden. "The plants are doing well this year," the older woman said. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always said Nebraska soil could grow anything if you treated it right. She was a wise woman. I wish I could have known her." Meredith smiled. She would have liked you. She had a soft spot for people who did not give up. Rosemary set the basket on the counter. Her hands, weathered from years of work, moved with practiced efficiency as she began washing the tomatoes. "Mr. Winslow called while you were outside. He is coming for Sunday dinner as usual. Asked if you needed him to bring anything." "Just himself, and maybe that wine he brought last time." Charlotte Rose seemed to like the bottle it came in. And they laughed together, the easy laughter of two women who had survived something terrible and found something precious on the other side. Rosemary had moved to the farmhouse 3 months ago, into the small cottage at the edge of the property that had once belonged to the groundskeeper. She helped with Charlotte Rose when Meredith needed it, tended the garden, cooked meals that reminded Meredith of her grandmother's recipes. But more than that, she was family, the kind you chose rather than the kind you were born into. "I heard from Eleanor yesterday," Meredith said. "The last of the civil suits has been settled. The Callahan assets are being distributed to the victims' families." "How much?" "Enough to make a difference. Not enough to bring anyone back." Rosemary nodded. She understood. Some wounds could not be healed with money. Some losses could not be compensated with settlements. "Susan's name was cleared in the final report," Meredith added. "Officially exonerated of any responsibility for Thomas's death. The investigation concluded that Vivian was responsible." Rosemary's hands stilled on the tomatoes. Her eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered, "for fighting for her, for making sure the world knows the truth." She deserved it. They all did. The afternoon passed in the comfortable rhythm of domestic life. Meredith gave Charlotte Rose her bath, read her 3 picture books about friendly animals and brave little girls, rocked her to sleep in the chair that had belonged to her great-great-grandmother. She stood in the doorway of the nursery and watched her daughter sleep. The yellow walls glowed in the late afternoon light. The mobile above the crib turned slowly, casting dancing shadows across the ceiling. She thought about all the things that had to happen for this moment to exist. The courage it had taken to pick up that burner phone. The trust she had placed in a man she had been taught to fear. The luck of surviving a labor that should have killed her. One different choice. One moment of hesitation. 1 second of doubt, and Charlotte Rose would never have been born. Or worse, she would have been born into the custody of people who saw her only as a means to an end, a trust fund to be managed, an inheritance to be controlled, a life to be disposed of when it was no longer useful. Meredith pressed her hand against the doorframe, felt the solid wood beneath her fingers, the weight of the house that had sheltered her family for 4 generations. She had almost lost everything: her life, her daughter, her belief that the world could be good. But she had held on, and now she was here, safe, alive, free. That was not nothing. That was everything. Garrett arrived at 6 with wine and flowers and a small stuffed elephant for Charlotte Rose. "You spoil her," Meredith said as she let him in. "That is what uncles are for." Uncle. The word had settled naturally into their vocabulary over the past year. Not by blood, but by choice, by the family they were building from the wreckage of the ones they had lost. They had dinner on the porch as the sun set over the Nebraska plains. Rosemary's tomato salad, grilled chicken with herbs from the garden, apple pie made from Meredith's grandmother's recipe. Charlotte Rose sat in her high chair and made a mess of her mashed peas. Garrett pretended to steal food from her plate. She shrieked with laughter and offered him a fistful of green mush. She has your spirit, Garrett said, already negotiating. She has her grandmother's stubbornness. My mother could argue with a fence post and win. I would have liked to meet her. She would have terrified you. She had very strong opinions about men who drove expensive cars. They laughed, the easy laughter of people who had stopped by pretending that the darkness did not exist and had chosen instead to build light around it. After dinner, while Rosemary put Charlotte Rose to bed, Meredith and Garrett walked through the orchard at the edge of the property. The apple trees were heavy with fruit. In a few weeks, they would harvest enough to make pies and cider and memories. I visited Douglas today, Garrett said. Meredith stopped walking. Why? I wanted to see him, to look him in the eye and know that he was exactly where he belonged. And he is smaller somehow. The prison uniform does not fit him well, and the charm does not work on guards the way it worked on juries and investors. Garrett paused. He asked about Charlotte Rose. Meredith's hands clenched at her sides. What did you tell him? That she is healthy and happy and will never know him as anything other than a cautionary tale. Garrett turned to face her. He will never touch her, Meredith. I made sure of that. The custody arrangements are airtight. Even if he somehow survives his sentence, he will never have any claim to her. I know. Eleanor explained it all. She breathed, let the tension ease from her shoulders. I just hate that he still exists. That he gets to wake up every morning and breathe and think and remember what he did. He gets to wake up every morning in a concrete cell with men who know exactly why he is there. Prisoners do not look kindly on people who hurt women and children. Garrett's voice hardened. His life will not be pleasant, and it will be long. That is its own kind of justice. They walked on. The fireflies were beginning to emerge, dancing points of light in the gathering darkness. The foundation board approved the new shelter, Meredith said. Construction starts next month. 50 beds for women escaping domestic violence, legal aid services, job training, everything we talked about. The first of many. I hope so. She watched a firefly land on a nearby branch, pulse its light, fly away. Sometimes I wonder if it is enough, building shelters and training counselors and giving speeches at charity galas. Does any of it actually change anything? You changed everything for the woman you spoke to last month, the one who left her husband after hearing your story. One woman who will raise her children to recognize the signs, who will tell her friends what to look for, who will maybe someday help another woman the way you helped her. Garrett stopped at the edge of the orchard. The farmhouse glowed in the distance, warm light spilling from windows that had seen 100 years of family dinners and quiet evenings. Change does not happen all at once. It happens one person at a time, one story at a time, one act of courage that inspires another. Meredith thought about that, about the ripples spreading outward from a single stone dropped in still water. She had told her story, had watched it spread across newspapers and television screens and social media feeds, had received letters from women who recognized themselves in her words, who had found the courage to leave, to fight, to survive. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that did not need to be filled, the kind that came from knowing someone well enough to simply be together. At the door, Garrett paused. The charity gala is next month, he said, the anniversary event. They want you to speak again. I know. Diana called this morning. Will you? Meredith considered the question. A year ago, speaking publicly had felt like torture. Every word dragged from her throat. Every memory a wound reopened. Now it felt different. Not easy, but necessary. Important. Yes, she said, I will speak. Because somewhere in that audience, there will be a woman who needs to hear that she is not alone, that she is not crazy, that survival is possible. Garrett smiled. Charlotte would be proud of you. I hope so. Meredith looked up at the stars beginning to emerge overhead. I hope she knows somehow that her death led to this, that it meant something. It meant everything. He left shortly after, his car disappearing down the long driveway, his taillights fading into the Nebraska night. Meredith sat on the porch swing and listened to the crickets sing. The house was quiet behind her. Charlotte Rose asleep in her yellow nursery, Rosemary reading in her cottage. The whole world settled into the peaceful rhythm of a summer evening. She thought about the woman she had been before, the trusting girl who had walked into a charity gala 6 years ago and met a man who seemed like everything she had ever wanted. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, warier, more careful with her heart, but also someone stronger, more compassionate, more determined to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. She had learned things in the fire of the past year, about courage and cowardice, about love and its absence, about the difference between the people who stood beside you in darkness and the ones who pushed you deeper into it. She had learned that family was not about blood. It was about choice, about showing up when things were hard, about staying when walking away would be easier. She had learned that justice was not the same as healing, that winning in court did not erase the scars, that moving on was a journey measured in years, not days. And she had learned that hope was not something you felt. It was something you did, a choice you made every morning when you got out of bed, a decision to believe that the future could be better than the past. The screen door opened. Rosemary came out with 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might want company," she said. "I would, thank you." They sat together on the porch swing, 2 women who had lost everything and found each other in the wreckage. "Do you ever regret it?" Rosemary asked. "Staying at that house all those years, waiting for someone like me to come along?" "Every day." Rosemary sipped her tea. "And never. The regret is for the time lost. The years I spent watching and waiting instead of acting. But the waiting led to you, led to Charlotte Rose, led to justice finally being served." She paused. "Sometimes the path is longer than we want, but it still leads where we need to go." Meredith thought about that, about the path that had led her here, the wrong turns and dead ends, the moments when giving up would have been easier than going on. "My grandmother used to say that God writes straight with crooked lines," she said. "I never understood what that meant until now. What do you think it means?" "That the story makes sense in the end, even when we cannot see the pattern while we are living it." They sat in silence as the stars wheeled overhead, ancient light from ancient fires, traveling millions of years to reach this small porch in the middle of Nebraska. The charity gala was held on a Saturday night in October. Meredith stood backstage and listened to the murmur of the crowd beyond the curtain. 500 people in evening gowns and tailored suits. The wealthy and powerful of 3 states gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves. A year ago, she would have resented them, their easy lives, their comfortable certainties, their ability to write a check and walk away, believing they had solved something. Now she understood that change came from everywhere, from the grassroots activists and the boardroom donors, from the women who escaped and the lawyers who defended them, from every person who chose to see the truth instead of looking away. "You're on in 5 minutes, the stage manager said. Meredith nodded, smoothed her dress, checked her notes one final time. She had written and rewritten this speech a dozen times, had practiced it in front of the mirror until she could deliver it without crying, had memorized every word so that she could look at the audience and really see them. The introduction began, her name, her story, the carefully sanitized version that omitted the worst details and emphasized the triumph over adversity. She walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was deafening. She stood at the podium and waited for silence. "1 year ago today," she began, "I escaped from a house where my husband and his family were planning my murder. I was 8 months pregnant, alone, terrified, convinced that no one would believe me." She paused, let the words settle. "I was lucky. I survived. I found people who believed me when I needed it most. I watched justice served in a courtroom packed with journalists and cameras and the whole world watching. But luck should not determine whether a woman lives or dies. Justice should not depend on having the right connections or the resources to fight back. Survival should not require extraordinary courage when ordinary safety should be guaranteed." She looked out at the audience, at the faces turned toward her, some sympathetic, some curious, some uncomfortable with the reality she was forcing them to confront. "Tonight, we celebrate the opening of the Charlotte Rose Center for Domestic Violence Prevention. 50 beds for women fleeing abuse. legal services to help them navigate the system, job training to help them build new lives, and most importantly, a message that they are not alone. But this center is just the beginning. There are millions of women in this country right now who are living in fear, who are being told that they are crazy, that no one will believe them, that there is no way out. We have to do better. We have to build systems that protect the vulnerable instead of enabling the powerful. We have to train doctors and lawyers and police officers to recognize the signs of coercive control. We have to create a world where women do not have to become heroes just to survive. She paused, felt the weight of the moment, the responsibility of speaking for all the women who could not speak for themselves. I am often asked what I would say to women who are currently in abusive situations, what advice I would give them, how I would help them find the courage to leave. I do not have easy answers. Every situation is different. Every woman's path to safety is her own. But I do have three words that I needed to hear, three words that saved my life. She looked directly into the cameras, into the eyes of every woman watching from homes where they were not safe, from relationships that were slowly destroying them. I believe you. The silence stretched, held, broke into applause that seemed to go on forever. Afterward, when the speeches were done and the checks were written and the wealthy and powerful had returned to their comfortable lives, Meredith stood alone on the empty stage. The lights had dimmed, the chairs were being folded, the caterers were packing up the leftover champagne. But she was not ready to leave. Not yet. She thought about Charlotte Winslow, about Susan Finch, about all the women whose names she had learned in the past year, the ones who had married into the Callahan family and never made it out alive. They were with her now, always, their memory a weight she would carry for the rest of her life. A movement in the shadows caught her eye, a young woman hovering near the exit, mid-20s, beautiful dress, fear in her eyes, the same fear Meredith had seen in her own reflection a year ago. She walked toward her, slowly, carefully, the way you approach a wounded animal. "Hello," she said. The woman startled. "I'm sorry, I should not be here. The event is over." "It is fine, I was just thinking." Meredith paused. "Are you all right?" The woman's composure cracked, just slightly, a tremor in her voice, a brightness in her eyes that might have been tears. "I listened to your speech," she said. "I was in the back. I could not stop thinking about what you said." "About what part?" "About the three words, the ones you needed to hear." Meredith waited, let the silence hold space for whatever needed to be said. "My husband is a good man," the woman said. The words came out practiced, rehearsed. "Everyone says so. His family is respected. His business is successful. He has never hit me. But sometimes the way he talks to me, the way he controls everything, the way he makes me feel like I am crazy for questioning anything." Her voice broke. "I do not know if I am overreacting. I do not know if this is just what marriage is supposed to be like." Meredith reached out and took her hand, gently, carefully. What's your name?" "Emily." "Emily." Meredith squeezed her hand. "You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. If something feels wrong, it probably is." "But what do? I have no proof, no evidence. He has never actually hurt me." "Abuse is not always physical. Sometimes it is the slow erosion of your sense of self, the gradual isolation from everyone who might help you, the careful manipulation that makes you doubt your own perceptions." Emily's tears spilled over. "I do not know what to do." "You do not have to know no right now. You do not have to do anything tonight." Meredith reached into her purse and pulled out a card. "This is the number for the Charlotte Rose Center. Call them. Talk to someone. Just to hear that what you are experiencing is real and that there are options." Emily took the card with trembling fingers, stared at it like it was a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are not alone, Emily. Whatever you decide to do, whenever you decide to do it, there are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will stand beside you." She watched Emily walk away, saw her tuck the card carefully into her purse, saw her square her shoulders as she pushed through the exit doors. Maybe she would call, maybe she would not. Maybe she would spend years trying to convince herself that everything was fine before she finally found the courage to leave. But she had the card now. She had the knowledge that someone believed her, and sometimes that was enough to plant a seed that would eventually bloom into action. Meredith walked out of the convention center and into the October night. The air was crisp. The stars were bright. The world was exactly the same as it had been an hour ago. But something had shifted. Something small but significant. One more woman knew she was not alone. One more seed had been planted. One more ripple was spreading outward across the surface of a world that desperately needed to change. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something, and sometimes something was all you had to work with. She drove home through the darkness, past fields of harvested corn and sleeping farmhouses in the quiet beauty of a land that had sheltered her family for generations. Charlotte Rose was asleep when she arrived. Rosemary had left a light on in the kitchen and a note on the counter. She went down easy. Applesauce for breakfast, sweet dreams. Meredith smiled, crept upstairs to the nursery, stood in the doorway and watched her daughter sleep. The moonlight fell across the crib. Charlotte Rose's small fist was curled against her cheek. Her breathing was soft and even, the peace of a child who had never known fear. She would know someday, when she was old enough. Meredith would tell her the truth about her father, about the family she had been born into, about the courage it had taken to escape. But she would also tell her about Garrett and Rosemary and Eleanor, about the strangers who had become family, about the power of believing in someone when the whole world told them they were wrong. She would tell her about Charlotte Winslow and Susan Finch and all the women whose sacrifices had made this moment possible. And she would tell her the most important thing of all, the lesson that had taken Meredith 30 years and one near-death experience to learn. That strength was not about enduring, not about standing still while the world battered you. Strength was about movement, one step, then another. Even when every step felt impossible, especially then. The prison door had been unlocked all along. You just had to find the courage to push it open. Meredith leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead, whispered a prayer into the darkness. A promise that she would spend the rest of her life fighting for a world where no child had to learn these lessons the hard way. Then she went to her own room, climbed into bed, fell asleep to the sound of crickets singing outside her window and the distant hoot of an owl in the orchard. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to make a difference in a world that desperately needed changing. But tonight, she was home, safe, alive, surrounded by the people who loved her. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that was enough. The first day of everything had finally arrived, and it was beautiful. And that is where our story ends. But for so many women out there, stories like this are just beginning. If Meredith's journey touched your heart, if her courage inspired you, if her words reminded you that survival is always possible, then I have a small favor to ask. Hit that like button, not for me, but for every woman who needs to know she is not alone. Leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your stories, your words of encouragement. This community is built on connection. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. Because every week we bring you stories of strength, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of women who refuse to give up. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for staying until the end. I believe in you, and I will see you in the next story.